Willow Creek Springs presents Healthy Living with your host, Joe Grumbine.
Hello and welcome to the Healthy Living Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Grumbine, and today we're going to resume our series on overcoming cancer and other obstacles. This is part 3, and we're going to call this one The Advocate. And we're going to get into the dynamic and the obstacles of the healthcare system and how important it is to either have an advocate or, more than likely, you're going to be your own advocate. And I will share with you even just some of today's journey through the healthcare system. Initially, as I was going through this, realizing I had this lump that wasn't going away on the side of my neck, and it was getting larger and larger. And initially, kind of, I could sort of turn the other way and people wouldn't really see it. And I could be in a picture and people wouldn't really see it. After a while, I realized I was fooling myself. And that's when I decided to go to the doctor. And I told some of this story before already, but the first thing the doctor said was, "Well, do you have insurance?" And I said, "No." And he says, "Well, you have a giant lump on the side of your neck. You're going to need insurance. So why don't you go get some insurance and then come back to me?" And I said, "All right, that sounds fair." So, I'm in California, United States of America, where we have this Obamacare fiasco where you have to have health insurance or you get penalized on your taxes. And I've been sucking up the penalty for a little while. I've gone back and forth. I had Kaiser for a little while, and a couple of years, and it was just so expensive. And I've been generally healthy my life. I've had a couple of issues with apnea, and I was able to address that through Kaiser. And I have a lung condition that ultimately I came up with a formula that's kept in check. But other than that, I really haven't had any health issues uh, to be concerned with. I did some blood work and it was reasonably normal. Um, I lost 50 pounds about during that time. So when I had Kaiser, I was 50 pounds heavier than I am now. And when I went back in to get after I'd lost the weight, and I went and did another sleep study through Kaiser and went ahead and, first thing they do, "You want a vaccine? Have you had your vaccine? Do you need some vaccines? Got some shots for you." I mean, it was just like, couldn't go near that place without them trying to stick a needle in your arm. And, that's a personal choice the way I see it. And it's not a choice I've made. And so I didn't really like the Kaiser world as a result of that. And you were kind of stuck with their programs. And that's not to say I like this thing that I'm on now. So I go in and we go and try to figure it out. There's no, somebody had given us some direction. And so we got into this covered California program where, there's some, it's the Obamacare California style. And your payment is subsidized, but if it wasn't, nobody could afford it. I mean, it's just the amount of money that these insurances are. It is such a friggin' racket, such a racket. So even with the subsidy, and I have a very low grade policy. It's the bronze policy, and I suppose there's a silver and a gold above me, maybe even a platinum or something. So I pay a high deductible, and the the rewards are minimal and the cost is higher, but the payment is lower. And even with that, I spend over about $500 a month for this health coverage. All right. So we go back to the doctor, and he seems to be this nice guy, and he says, well, I got some good news for you and some bad news. He says, the good news is I'm confident that it's not cancer. And the reason why is because you're just a specimen of health. And if you had a tumor this big and it was cancerous, it would have already metastasized and spread all over your body, and you'd be withered up and probably blind and not able to swallow and all these things. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's good. So what is it? It says, well, there's a lot of reasons that this can happen. It's probably just genetic, and there's not anything you could have done about it. He says, however, you need to take care of it. It's sitting on top of your carotid artery, and it will eventually interfere with your nervous system and your muscular system. And, just sitting on your artery, that's your main flow that goes into your brain. You really need all that oxygen and blood flow. I said, all right. Fair enough. So the first step is an ultrasound. And I go in and I get this ultrasound, and it seemed that my insurance was okay. And don't remember exactly. This was more than a year ago. Anyways, I come to find out, then he orders a blood test, and I go in to go get that. Or later on, he ordered a CT scan, and they say, well, we can't find you. And I'm like, well, what do you mean you can't find me? I give them, everybody wants to know your date of birth and your first name. All right. They can't find you. So I go back to the doctor. I'm like, doctor, they can't find me. This is, oh, well, I think there's a problem with your insurance. Now, I've already been paying on this now. We fast forwarded about a year because he was so sure that this thing was not cancerous. I was like, all right, well, let me work on it myself. I'm working with other plant medicine. I'm working mentally. I've got some cannabis medicine. I've got, let me go at it with my own toolbox. My own toolbox just really wasn't doing much. It seemed like it's still slowly growing. It's not getting smaller for sure. And so that's when I was like, all right, I got to get on this thing. I don't really care what it is. It needs to go. But the funny thing about this, I'd have to say half a dozen people in my life, by now it's getting pronounced enough where people are like, what the hell's wrong with your neck? And I tell them I got a lump. I don't know what it is. We're trying to figure out, well, you got to get that cut out. That's what they tell me. And I was like, yeah, that's great. How do you do that? And everybody had this. I mean, these were doctors, these were professionals, these were people that, genuinely cared about me. But to have such an ignorant, or I don't know, broad brush response, you need to get that cut out. Like I could just snap my finger and make it happen. Finally, I told this one doctor that I'm good friends with, I said, well, great, give me $100,000. I'll go up to and find me a surgeon who will just do it. And he stopped and thought for a second. He's like, oh, yeah, there isn't really a way to go and just do that. And there isn't a way to just go and snap your finger and make a thing happen unless you're, ridiculously wealthy and have access to some personal physician. I don't know. I just don't know. There isn't a book that I know of anyways that says this is how to navigate the United States healthcare system. And so me being my own advocate, because nobody else is, I've just been walking through this. So I come to find out after multiple phone calls and multiple, people not understanding. Well, finally, what happened was I went to get a referral to a specialist. The doctor says, look, you got to get a surgeon to look at this, and it's time to move up to a specialist. So he refers me to this clinic, and I call over there, and at first, they didn't get the referral. And then after that, it was finally, well, it was a good week or so, and they finally get the referral. Now remember, every time that something happens, time's going by. I have a friggin' giant lump on my neck, and if it wasn't for all the time that had gone by, it'd probably be resolved by now. But I feel like I'm not any closer to the resolution than I was, 6 months ago, and I've been at it pretty heavy, pretty heavy duty. And so finally, after a while, I went back to the primary care doctor, the one who sent the referral. Says, look, they're not getting the referral. Can you do something about this? I really want to get this thing taken care of. And he says, I'll tell you what, we'll go in there and we'll make sure you get this referral. So they actually took the time and they addressed it. And we come to realize that I wasn't in their system, like the insurance didn't have me registered. And we realized what happened was they got my birth date wrong. So that means everything that's happened, either I've had to pay for it out of pocket, even though I've been paying all of these, monthly payments, or it hasn't been paid and there's still some kind of an outstanding balance. And so then I get on and I start calling the healthcare provider. And I don't know. The thing that's difficult about this is because of the nature of cancer and the reasons that it exists, I'm really doing my best to reduce the stress in my life. And yet, when you can't get something done that you need to for your health and actually to hopefully remain alive because of ineptitude and I don't know, it's just a quagmire, just a nightmare of bureaucracy. Every time you call, it start all over again. You never talk to the same person twice. You never have a number to reach the person you talk to. You have these gatekeepers, you have these, departments, and every time you get on the phone, you start all over again. What's your name? What's your date of birth? And then you open it up and then you begin. Well, now what is it that you need? And you start all over. You keep starting all over. And remember, this is why I'm doing this podcast, because of course people in my life want this same thing too. And I just will not do it. I cannot do it. It's hard enough to maintain my composure when I'm navigating this system and doing everything I can to accomplish something like getting an appointment or getting some records or figuring it out, and it's every once in a while you find somebody who's a little bit helpful. Now, the good news is most of the people I've encountered have been reasonably pleasant or remarkably pleasant. Only a handful of them have been a little bit snippy, in which case I just dump on them. I mean, not dump on them like being angry, but I just say, listen, I've got a squamous cell carcinoma, a giant mass on my neck. I'm trying to stay alive. Can you help me here? And every day that goes by is a day that could potentially be the day that I needed to get this thing done. And I'm really just trying to save my life here. And generally they're understanding when I drop that card on them. And it's just ridiculous. It frustrates me, but I'm practicing what I know about letting stress go and not hanging on to it, not letting it build up, and we're moving forward. And so, this is just continued. Finally, I think, I don't know, I must have spent 3 to 4 hours total on the phone with multiple different parties before finally they got my date of birth right. And then instead of it being okay, they say, well, it's going to take several days to be processed through the system. So everybody's sort of gets to say, well, I can't control anything because of the system. I can only do what I can do. Nobody's responsible for anything. And whatever. If it doesn't happen, you don't get it. If it does happen, well, then, you got lucky and keep going. So finally, I got this biopsy done. Once I got into this clinic, I got this reservation or this appointment. It was remarkably good. They got in there, they found me, everything was fine, got into the doctor. He's an asshole, but it moved quickly. Went from an initial appointment to getting this biopsy, and then all of a sudden, it stalls out again. And, they told me after they did the biopsy, well, pathology's running slow and it could be a week or so, and ended up being 2 full weeks. And the doctor in 2 weeks calls me up and says, "You got squamous cell carcinoma. I'm going to refer you to Loma Linda and the surgical team over there, and I'm going to order a PET scan." Well, this was, again, October 15th, and it's now October 30th. There were 15 days into it, and I have gotten zero. Finally, today, got an appointment with the specialist or with the surgical team for another month from now. And so, that's what's been happening here. So today, well, finally, and I know I've already told this, but this is the advocate story, so we're going to tell it from the advocate perspective. I'm trying to balance being diligent with not being an asshole, because I know what it's like working with assholes, and they make you not want to help them, even if they're sick, even if they have issues, even if they, are dying, who knows, whatever. If they're not pleasant, it just makes you really not want to help them. And so I'm doing my best to be reasonable and pleasant, but my God, every time you make a phone call, you start all over again. And it doesn't matter if you just call them, you start all over again. So this Riverside Medical Center is where my doctor's office is, but I can't call my doctor's office directly. I got to go through this whole system. I got one number to call, and that number's like their main desk. And then they direct me to the department, and they direct me to the doctor's office. And eventually I find my way down there. After several days, I contact Loma Linda. They can't find my recommendation or my referral. I keep calling. A couple more days later, finally they find it, and they determine that no, my insurance is not contracted with them. So now I go back to the doctor and I say, "Hey, they're not going to do it. What do I do?" So now I've already lost a good week because I don't know. See, I don't know what could be done. In my world, there's a world where you can check on these things. Like, you can cross-reference somebody's insurance plan with the places that can serve it. But maybe they don't have that. I don't know the answer. I'm just being my own advocate here, trying to get this done. And so then they go, "Okay, well, we're going to send another referral, and this time it's going to go to UCI." I says, "Okay, that sounds great." And so, a couple days later, I call over there. Nope, don't have it yet. Could be 4 or 5 days. I wait 3 or 4 more days. Nope, not there. And what's crazy about this place is it's like you call over there and everything's this automated system, and you try to find the quickest way to where you can actually talk to a human being. And for a while, they have this situation where, if you don't want to wait, leave us your number and we'll call you back. I did that. And then it comes back, "Well, we had some issue." So I don't know if they've got my number or not. I call them multiple times trying to get through. Finally, I try another route and a different access point. I finally get through. And today, so now it's another week and a half. today, finally, I got an appointment set, and the appointment is set for November 19th. So we're good 3 weeks out before I could even talk to them. And then what they said was, well, have you had any imaging done? And I said, well, yeah, I've had, ultrasound, a CT scan. I'm supposed to be getting a PET scan. They says, well, if you can get a CD version of the imaging reports and bring them in with you, that would be very helpful. And I'm thinking to myself, shit, nobody tells you how to do any of this. And luckily, I had asked them for a copy of my reports because I had another doctor that was going to give another opinion prior to the biopsy. And so I have something at least. But I call over to the clinic and I'm saying, hey, can I get this done? And basically they say, well, you got to go to medical records. And after today, I realized that it's entirely possible that unless I call again to find out for sure, that if I go to medical records, they're gonna, and this is, an hour drive to get to this place, 45 minutes to an hour. And I know I'm going to get there and they're going to say, oh, well, you didn't have any of this imaging done here. You have to go to the place where you got it done. I can just feel that one coming. So now tomorrow I got to go back and validate, verify. How do I get these things? So I got 3 weeks to get that together. Well, the PET scan, I keep calling over there. So it's now been a full 2 weeks, 2 weeks and a day since it was ordered. And they keep coming up with nothing. Well, we're checking. Finally today, I'm like, look, I have fucking cancer and I need to get this PET scan so that I can find out how bad it is. And you guys can't seem to get it together. It's been 2 weeks. What do I have to do to get an appointment? I'm just trying to have a sense of urgency here. And finally I get, well, weird. Somehow your insurance has some kind of a third party approval for these services. And they can't locate, somehow they can't locate this. Nobody can seem to figure it out. And I'm thinking to myself, well, so if I didn't say anything and I didn't keep calling and advocating, how many days or weeks would go by? Would this have just gotten lost and it just wouldn't have happened? I unfortunately think that's what would happen. And all these people who claim to care and all these people who, and that's why, again, I'm doing this on the podcast because all the people who say they care, what are you really going to do? You might care about me as a human, but what are you going to do to help me? There isn't a damn thing you can do. So, that's why we're doing this. I'm telling the story so you can understand why I don't want to tell you in person because it's just too costly to my energy. It takes all this energy just to get the damn problem solved, much less to go and tell it to a bunch of people who can't do anything about it. And so finally, they say, well, if you'd like, we can refer this to a service outside of the clinic. I'm like, I couldn't care less who does this. I said, I've already been to 2 different places. I don't care who does this. Let's just get it done. So that by the time I have this appointment with the specialist, I can show them what it says. And so then finally they go, this is after I don't know how many calls today. And I get to the supervisor who talked to the other supervisor, who talked to the other supervisor. And I finally am talking to somebody who seems like she's genuinely putting an effort in. And she finally says, okay, I got the approval. We're going to send it over to this other imaging company. And, I'm going to fax it over. And if you can call back in 20 minutes. And I says, okay, here's the number. All right. So, they keep spitting numbers at me. And wherever I am, I've got to, make sure I've got a pen and paper or some way to jot this number down and remember what it is. And all these things, but that's again part of being your own advocate. You got to be prepared. And then, so I said, all right, you say 20 minutes, I'll give it an hour. I call over there in an hour. And of course, what's your name? What's your date of birth? And I think I was already in their system, so they have some kind of a file on me. I think they had done one of the imaging already on me. And they say, well, who's, the doctor? Oh, we don't have this yet. I'm thinking to myself, they faxed it over. They emailed it, whatever it is. I'm like, how do you not have it? But what do you do? There's only so many things you can do from where you're sitting. And you got to keep your composure, because if you start losing it, then you become ineffective. And so then they say, well, can you contact your doctor and find out what type of PET scan it is? Because I don't know that there's multiple kinds of PET scans. So then I go back again. And it's like starting all over every single time. I swear to God, my doctor's office must have 20 employees, and none of them know who I am or what's going on. And finally, I get this guy to tell me, well, this is, he ordered a PET scan from the base of the skull to the mid thigh. So that's the area that they're looking for to see if there's any other activity. I says, all right, fair enough. So then I call back again to the imaging place. And I say, okay, so this doctor says, this is what the last time I just talked to somebody, they said, if you can tell me what type of PET scan, we can at least schedule an appointment. And she goes, what's your doctor's name? I go, Dr. Berkovic. And I can't remember his first name. I think his first name is Euro or Yuri or something like that. She goes, well, do you have a phone number? I go, well, the phone number I have is for the clinic. I only have one number. And I give her the number. She goes, oh, well, that's a number for a different doctor. I can't help you. And I'm just like, after all of that. So literally today, and I hate that word literally, but today, I've been on the phone for a minimum of 3 hours, and generally pretty short calls. Most of the time is waiting on hold. I have probably spoken to a minimum of 12 or 13 people, and I've accomplished getting one appointment set for 3.5 weeks out, and I have yet to be able to resolve getting this PET scan. And I'm going to go back at it again tomorrow with a fresh attitude. And so again, just remember, if you're in a situation like this, I hope you're energetic enough, healthy enough to be able to go at it the way I'm going at it. Because if you don't, you're going to get lost. You're going to slip through the cracks. Maybe you're fortunate enough to find some doctor that has an easier system than this, but everybody I talk to, I don't hear anybody telling me a story that's much different from this, unless you find yourself into a great medical team and you get entrenched there. So the moral of the story is be prepared to dig in and be your own advocate. All right, this is it for today. We will talk to you soon. Thank you for supporting the Healthy Living Podcast.
This has been another episode of the Healthy Living Podcast. We produce this show so that people can share their stories, people that have overcome obstacles, people that are undergoing obstacles. We're building a community of health-minded individuals. If you're interested in supporting the show, please leave a review on the platform you're listening to it on. If you're interested in becoming a guest, please send an email to itsjoegrumbine@gmail.com, or you can send a note into the notes section of the podcast. All right, well, thank you for supporting this show, and we hope you've enjoyed it.